So today's topic is Buddhism as a psychotherapy. Right? Buddhism itself has helped a lot of people to calm their mind. And this is what we mean by psychotherapy. And I'm not just talking about normal calming of mind. I'm also talking about people who are experiencing anxiety, experiencing various types of mental disorders, to the point that they may fall into depression. So Buddhism has teachings that can help people come out of that. So let's take a look at what I'm going to cover today. I will very briefly talk about the reality of life, what we go through. Day in, day out, we experience emotional encounters, and they may lead to traumas. Right? Trauma is some kind of suffering, mental suffering deep inside. We experience adversities, things go wrong, things don't work out the way we want, and that leads to challenges. And challenges, of course, leads to frustrations, anger, and worry, and all kinds of unhealthy mental states. We also face uncertainties. We don't know what's going to happen next. And this leads to worries, and worries get compounded into fears. So worries and fears. So we're going to take a look at what are these realities. Next, we're going to take a look at what is the problem behind that. And these are anxiety, fear, depression, and even to the extent of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And we will also look at the conditions that lead up to them, the causes and conditions behind them. And basically, the most important part we have to understand is that we experience emotional arousal. So because of that, we get emotional. And when we get emotional, we start to experience all kinds of mental suffering, physical and mental. And we also have perceptions of things going on, which may perceive as some kind of threat or conflict. And that can lead to mental proliferation. Mental proliferation means the mind begins to wander off, start to imagine things that are not real, imagine things that may get out of control. You know, all these are just imagination. Mental proliferation is very much imagination. It's all in your mind, right? It's not the reality of your life. The reality of your life is that you're experiencing emotional encounters, you're experiencing adversities and uncertainties. That's the reality. But all that leads to this mental proliferation. But we have a solution. The Buddha has taught what is called introspection, and popularly it is known as mindfulness. Now, we won't be dwelling deep into mindfulness, but we're going to touch on the surface of mindfulness. But very importantly, I want to point out to this aspect of introspection. That means bringing your mind, your attention inwards, examining what's happening inside you. And it's only by doing that can you understand what's going on and what is hurting you, right? And finally, we're going to take a look at the outcome. What can we gain out of it? We can, and we can reach the perception of peace and harmony. This is the opposite of the normal perception we get. The normal perception we get is under the conditions where it says perception of threat or conflict. But eventually, the outcome of calming the mind is to attain this perception of peace and harmony. So this is what we're going to cover today. So let's begin with looking at the reality, daily realities of stress. What's going on that keeps stressing us? See, things are happening around us, and all these are constantly bombarding our senses because things are happening. We have to pay attention. We get distracted. So it's bombarding our senses and putting pressure on our attention system to pay attention. Otherwise, we might miss what's going on. And this is really getting worse in the 21st century. It wasn't quite like that. You know, I remember when I was a little kid growing up, and that's many decades ago. You know, life was so simple and we were never too distracted. But today, you know, the phone rings and then we get distracted. When I was a youngster, when we say, let's go to the restaurant, and what do? Forget about the phone. Let's leave the house because all the phones are on wire. We don't have a wire long enough to bring it along with us to the restaurant. So we can forget about the phone. We go to the restaurant, and what happens in the restaurant? We are enjoying each other's company, having a great time. But today, everybody brings his phone along. And when he arrives at the restaurant, everybody sits around the table. And what do? Everybody's staring down on the phone. That's the realities of today. And on top of that, things are always changing. Circumstances are never the same. When Buddha called this anicca, and insecurities, impermanence, things are always changing, uncertainties. And that leads to insecurities because nothing remains unchanged. It's unpredictable, and that can lead to all kinds of fear and frustration and worry. And not only that, we are also faced with our friends, relatives, children, parents, whatever, bosses, employees. They are constantly having some kind of expectations and demands upon us, take up our time. So that puts a lot of pressure on our ability to respond. So all these are the realities of life today. We are faced with these realities. We can't escape them. Unless, of course, you go to the jungle and live in there like a hermit. Otherwise, if you want to live in the city, you are faced with all this. Right? Even in the provinces, you're still faced with all this. And deadlines and schedules. We have to meet. We have to get to the meeting on time. We have to, you want to join us on Zoom, you got to turn it on time. At 3 o'clock we start. And of course, problems, obstacles, challenges, difficulties keep arising constantly. They are like time bomb. And all these are realities of life, daily realities of stress that every single one of us is going through. Tell me, who is not experiencing this? Anyone who is not experiencing this, please raise your hand. Right? Every single one of us without exception. Even the monks, they are experiencing this. No one can escape this. This is the reality of what the Buddha called samsara. Samsara is referring to this conventional life that we're going through. And this conventional life is filled with all these uncertainties on these daily realities. That is samsara. And to free ourselves from this samsaric world, we have to cultivate and train our mind, purify our mind to the extent that we become enlightened. Once a person has become enlightened, his mind is no longer disturbed by all this. All this can be happening, but he doesn't get affected at all, not a single bit. The monks are training to do that, but not all of them are successful. Even those who are successful, not 100% of the time, okay? Lay people are also trying to do that. Many of us who are devoted to the teachings of the Buddha, we try to do that, but then we are not always successful. So we are faced with all this. And what do all this mean? They create this perception of threat and conflict, So it's very important to realize it's these daily realities that cause us to think that something is threatening my safety, something is threatening my peace of mind, and it is in conflict of what I really want in life. Every one of us, we just want to be happy, but all these things are not making us happy. So it's some kind of a conflict. And let's take a look at how that is happening inside us, in the brain. So there is a part in the brain, right, that is sensing everything that's going on around us. And that little structure in the brain is called the amygdala. Everything we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, it comes through the amygdala. And that amygdala senses everything we perceive through our sense organs. And it is looking for potential threats to our existence. Originally, the amygdala was evolved to protect us from harm. So that when we sense some danger, the amygdala activates the body to protect ourselves. For example, somebody throws a ball or an object at you. Do you think about, oh, this person is throwing that basketball towards me. If I don't raise my hand to block it, or if I don't duck and get out of the way, that basketball is going to hit my face and it can be very painful. So I should either catch it or avoid it. Do you have time to think like that when somebody throws a basketball at you? You don't have. It's your amygdala sensing this fast approaching object, producing a bodily reaction that either moves out of the way or catches the ball. Now, if you're able to catch the ball, then you're really fighting it. If you're moving away from it, you are flight. So it's fight or flight. Fight means you try to counter it, go against it to prevent it from hurting you. Flight means you run away, escape. And most of the time we either fight or flight. But have you ever noticed young kids, the first time or the first few times you throw a ball at their face, they don't know. They just stare and then boom, it hits their face. Haven't you ever noticed that? That is called freeze. So that is freeze, fight, or flight. Freeze happens when people have not experienced the problem before. Children, when you throw a ball at their face for the first time, even the first 10 times, they are not so sure what's going on, so they freeze, and then it hits their face, and then they cry, calling for mama. It's always like that. But after a few times, they realize, oh, it's painful, and then the amygdala is programmed to sense when a fast approaching object coming toward my face, it's going to be painful, cause the whole body to duck. So the flight, or to cause the hands to block it, that is fight. So you have freeze, fight, or flight. That's really what's going on. That's what the amygdala is meant to do, right? It releases these hormones to help it to do all that. So the amygdala is like a bodyguard. Unfortunately, the amygdala can also be unnecessarily aroused by emotions because the amygdala is connected to our memory system. So the moment we get emotional, every emotional thought actually triggers a series of memory. And because of that, the amygdala is activated. So in other words, if you are thinking of something unwholesome or something that is fearful, just by thinking of it, there is no threat, but you're just thinking of it. That triggers the amygdala and causes all these hormones to be released. These are stress hormones. This is why if you sit there and you start thinking of some terrible things that's happening, you think of maybe you're getting involved in a motor accident, your whole body starts to shake because it's triggering the release of all these hormones, causing your whole body to shake. This is really what's going on. By simply thinking of bad thoughts, your body reacts. So the body and the mind are interconnected, right? And when it can be unnecessarily aroused. So when the amygdala is unnecessarily aroused, it becomes a terrorist in the brain. So from being a bodyguard, the opposite, it becomes a terrorist in the brain, causing the brain to produce all these stress hormones. This is really what the amygdala does. So what really makes us stress, we can summarize in 3 categories. First, emotional encounters. That means encounters that arouse the emotions of fear, anger, anxiety, frustration, or so on, right? So in other words, some traumatic event that happened. Hearing the passing away of a relative, for instance, that is an emotional encounter. You feel traumatic. It's hurtful, especially if that relative is in your direct family, your own brother, sister, or even your mother, father, or or very immediate close relative, or even your best friend. Very traumatic. The other kind of stress is adversities, things that are always going wrong, things that are not according to what you want. Failures, disappointments. You expected a promotion at the end of the year because you've done such a great job and your boss is very happy with it, but somehow at the end of the year, your boss never gave you the promotion and instead gave somebody else that promotion. So it's some kind of a disappointment, right? Encountering problems, difficulty, troubles, obstructions, restrictions, or challenges in life. That leads to failures, disappointments, right? This is the second category, adversities, problems, and challenges. And the third is uncertainties, unpredictable things, right? Confusion, turmoil, something that is unexpected, a turn of event. And a classic example in 2019, by January, we start hearing of this disease called COVID. And that was the uncertainty. And that created a lot of confusion and turmoil, right? So unexpected, unfamiliar circumstances, changes, complexity, vacillation, indecisiveness, boredom, even boredom. So these are the three main categories of things we experience in life that lead to stress. And stress can lead to depression. Depression can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. You have to be careful. If you don't take care of stress, stress leads you to feel depressed. And if you don't try to help yourself and get people to help you when you are feeling stressed and depressed, it can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is simply that the moment you remember that unwholesome or unhappy event, it causes your whole body to go into this very depressed state out of the blue suddenly. So you have to be very careful. We're going to do something about it. Unfortunately, there are many teachings, not only Buddhism, but there are many teachings that help people to do that. But today we're going to focus on what the Buddha has taught that can help us in doing that. Okay. So let's look at the conditions that lead to all this, how this is all happening. I call this the vicious cycle of emotions. Everything can be boiled down to the fact that your emotions are reacting. If you learn to tame your emotions, you can be a very peaceful person. If you can't control your emotions, you will experience all kinds of unhappiness, pain, and all kinds of depression in your life. It's really about how you handle your emotions. So when things happen around us, these are external stimulus that stimulate our sense organs, and we become aware of things going on. So when we become aware, we begin to interpret. We begin to try to give meaning to it. And very often, the meaning we give is really based on our own past experience. And most often, we very normally do not give happy meaning to things that happen. Most of the time, ask yourself, every time when something unexpected happens, are you happy about it? No. Most of the time, something makes you unhappy. So we begin to have this perception of threat or conflict. And that is interpretation of circumstances. And that leads to us creating concept of what is happening in our life, conceptualization. And with that, it begins to trigger our emotions, arousal of emotion. And our mind begins to think of stuff that causes the body to be stressed. And then the body begins to react with stress, bodily discomfort. And this is freeze, fight, or flight reaction in the body. Even by thinking, it can cause that, right? And when that happens, it actually triggers a chain reaction. So this is really the beginning of this chain reaction. This is the stress reaction. It is this experience of stress that leads to a chain reaction that makes us suffer terribly. And that chain reaction basically is that the mind gets disturbed. So first, when we interpret things with threat or conflict, it creates stress reaction in the body. And when that stress reaction arises, it disturbs the mind further and leads to what is called distress. Distress is the mental suffering. Stress is the physical suffering. So stress reaction affects the body, and the body now affects the mind, and then distress, mental disturbance. And this leads us to behave in a habitual way. Some people call it pushing my button, so we begin to behave. Some people like to behave by shouting, using voice to show their anger. They get angry with something, or something arises and they're not happy with it, they will shout at people around them. Some people do that, and that is called habitual emotional reactions. Some people shut down. They start crying, So the moment some unexpected things happen, they start to cry. So there are different people react differently. All these are habitual emotional reactions. It depends on a number of things. It depends on your upbringing. It depends on what has been happening to you in recent times. It depends on many factors. Some of it may even be hereditary, right? So there are many factors that leads us to behave with habitual emotional reaction. And that starts to create this very severe experience in us that we start to have anger, greed for something pleasant, anger for something unpleasant, fear for something unknown, hatred, worry, anxiety, all kinds of emotional reactions arising. As you can see, all this is connected to how we react emotionally. And that gets out of control. Right? When we begin to personalize the thing and say that, oh, this is happening, somebody's trying to hurt me, we start to personalize it, I, me, or mine, then it starts to lead to very severe experiences. Mental proliferation starts to kick in. Right? And this is feeding the emotions with imagination, memory, expectation, causing the mind to get out of control. That is mental proliferation. That at that point, you are going into depression. And if you don't help yourself, if you don't get help with experienced and qualified people to help you, you will end up experiencing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So we have to be very careful about all this that's going on. So this part, the second part where the mind gets disturbed, this leads to this emotional chain reaction. When it gets out of control, we fall into deep depression. So let's take a look at how that is happening based on what the Buddha has taught about mind as an activity. Now, realize the mind is not the brain, right? The brain basically is the organ, and the activity of the brain gives rise to the experience of mind. But the brain is not the mind. The mind is not the brain. Activity in the brain leads to experience of the mind. So when you say mind, this is because you are experiencing some form of consciousness within you. But that is also associated with the way the brain is working. So let's take a look at how the brain works in this case. There are three parts of these mental experiences associated with the brain. First, it is perception. The Buddha called it vijnana. Some people translate this word as consciousness. That means the awareness of something going on. That's it. Awareness of what was perceived through the sense organs. That is vijnana. So some people call it consciousness. Well, that's fine. Consciousness of the sense organs. But it is also a process of perception. You begin to perceive. You begin to perceive something to be a threat or a conflict or a blessing. Right? Few people think of it as blessing, but there are people well-trained, well-cultivated in the mind. They are able to see blessings every time something happens. Right? I'll talk about that example later. I did have a car accident, but then it became a blessing. I also had another accident on arrival at the airport 2 days ago, but it became a blessing. I'll talk about that later. Let me finish this first. So process of perception. With that, the mind begins to think about it. This is the thinking mind, cognition and conception. The cognitive process. The Buddha calls it mano. Basically, we begin to identify something and put it into category, categorize identification, and we begin to perceive mental image of what's happening, and we start to label it, call it something, right? So whenever we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something, we automatically give it some label, right? So perceiving that mental image is rupa, and then giving it a name is nama. And this is happening in the thinking mind, the cognition and conception. And it also leads to cognizing the experience with concepts. Now we begin to conceptualize, we begin to interpret, and that leads to choices in life, right? Smart, wise people will be able to have good choices. People who are ignorant, people who don't pay attention to what is really going on, they end up thinking all kinds of unwholesome choices. Choices is something that arises in your mind and you choose. And smart people, wise people, end up choosing something that is helpful. Whereas people who are ignorant, they might choose something that is harmful. Right? And then comes the third part of the mind, which is the emotions, the affective process. The Buddha called it chitta. And this leads to mood and temperament. Mood means it is something whether we like it, we don't like it, that is our mood, right? We like it, we feel that, oh, it's nice. or we feel it's not so nice. That leads to our mood. Temperament is our reaction. If it is something nice, we want more of it. If it is something not so nice, we want to get rid of it. So this emotional reaction, the Buddha calls tanha. And it is translated as craving also. The word tanha is sometimes translated as craving. So if you read Buddhist books and you come across the word craving, that is what they're referring to. They're referring to the Pali word tanha, which is really emotional reaction, but it is often translated as craving, right? So this emotional reaction can be wanting something, so that's craving, or trying to get rid of something, right? So that is the opposite of craving, actually. And that leads to feelings. You start to feel something about it. Is it something you want, something you like, or you don't like? And that leads to your mood, right? Which is now you feel good if it is something pleasant and you like it, or you feel bad because it is something unpleasant and you don't want it. That's your mood. And temperament, you begin to react. These are all emotional states. You want to react against it. So these, and finally, it leads to personalizing, clinging. Personalizing this experience, upadana, that is often translated as clinging or grasping or attachment. Whatever happens in our life, we always start to personalize it and say, I, me, or mine, I'm feeling this. I don't like this. I am angry with this. The I, me, or mine is very strong. And that leads to this very self-centered nature in us, right? So we begin to be very self-centered. This is what's going on in the mind. These are the three parts of mental experiences: process of perception, cognitive process, and affective process. This process of perception is perceiving something that's happening around us. This cognitive process is cognizing, thinking about what's going on. And with that thinking, we begin to create concept, conceiving. And finally, this affective process, we begin to feel we like it or we don't like it, the affection towards what's going on. And with this affection triggers this emotional urges arising. And when that emotional urge arises, we begin to be self-centered. We begin to cling on to say, I don't like it, I like it, you know, whatever it is. So this is what's going on in the mind. Fortunately, we have a part of the brain that helps us to think properly. See, earlier on, we talked about amygdala, right? The amygdala is the part that leads to emotional arousal. Now, the part that leads to our thinking, clear thinking, is this outer brain, right? Amygdala is inside in the emotional part of the brain. This is the outer brain, right? And it is made of these lobes, right? These four different lobes. The frontal lobe, the parietal lobe over the top, the temporal lobe on the side, and the occipital lobe at the back. But it is the frontal lobe where all these things are happening: paying attention, long-term memory, logic and critical thinking, lateral thinking, and so on. All happening in the frontal lobe. But at the bottom part of the frontal lobe, right behind your eyebrow, there is a thing called the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain that's going to help you to be happy or unhappy. In other words, whether you're going to be a happy person or you're not going to be a happy person, it depends on how you train this part of your brain. And that is the prefrontal cortex. This helps you make decision making. It helps you to set goals. It helps you to plan what you are supposed to do. It helps you to judge right from wrong, good from bad. It helps you to reason out causes and effect. When you do something, what does it lead to, right? Causes and effects. And finally, it helps you to rationalize, meaning looking at your resources. Are you able to handle it? How can you allocate various resources in your whole being to help you solve your problem? That is the prefrontal cortex, the role of the prefrontal cortex, which is right behind your eyebrow. That's why you have to be very careful. Take care of your brain. Don't play sports that hurts your brain. There are a lot of people who play sports hitting the ball, or boxing, for instance, people get punched. All this will damage your brain. One of the greatest fighters of all time, Muhammad Ali, right? He ended up with Parkinson's disease. because, you know, he was so badly damaged with all those punching going on. So now let's take a look at this, what's going on in the brain. There is this tug of war that's between your emotional brain, your amygdala, and your thinking brain, which is your prefrontal cortex.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, time!
And when we try to control them, we start a tug of war between our brain's oldest and newest parts. While ancient structures like the amygdala respond to threats by trying to turn our anger or fear on, it's newer structures, such as the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, that try to turn them off. It's the tug of war between these two systems that gives rise to our emotions. At New York University, neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux has studied how the amygdala and the cortex shape our emotional responses. You know more about the amygdala than anybody alive, and you still can't control yours.
No.
Why?
Now, there's an interesting thing, again, that has to do with the wiring of the brain. This is, if we could just look at it here. So this is the human brain inside a skull. And the prefrontal cortex is here in the front, right behind your forehead. And that is the newest part of the brain. This is where we make our decisions. This is where we plan for the future and strategize. The lateral prefrontal cortex has no connectivity with the amygdala. The amygdala has superhighways to talk to the cortex, but the prefrontal cortex has only back roads and side streets to get to the amygdala. And therefore, it is unable to tell the amygdala, cool it.
But why are there no connections?
We're in the process of evolving as we speak, and those connections have not been put in yet. This thing was built to do fancy things cognitively, not necessarily to control our emotions.
Okay. It is built to do fancy things, not necessarily to control our emotions. And you heard them say that in the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking brain, and the amygdala, which is your emotional brain, they are in conflict, because the amygdala is constantly, whenever it is aroused, it's constantly sending messages to the thinking brain, sabotaging and disturbing the thinking brain, while at the same time, the connections from the thinking brain going to the amygdala are very weak, because it has evolved that way, and your thinking brain cannot stop your emotion. Think as you like to be. It's not easy to stop the emotion. When your emotions are aroused, your whole body changes. You get angry and all sorts of things. And you cannot just say, okay, stop it. It won't happen. You got to do something to help yourself. And today we're going to touch on what can we do to help ourselves to stop that, okay? So we need some help. But that help is also depending on our awareness, our mindfulness, okay? So what is going on is this conflict that is between emotions and reasoning, the thinking and the emotional part of the brain. So when we look at it logically, right, feeling and reasoning are in conflict. Feeling, basically, this is the emotions. And reasoning, this is really the thinking part, the intellect part. They are in conflict. When feeling and reasoning pull in opposite directions, right, we begin to experience this condition called cognitive dissonance. The mind becomes perplexed. Usually, then we have difficulty making decision what to do, being pulling in opposite direction. Emotion says, I want this. Thinking says, I shouldn't be doing that. But somehow, because of the structure of the brain, which one wins most of the time? Emotions or thinking? Emotion. Ask yourself, let me give you an example. You want to buy a brand new phone. Do you go to the phone shop? Ask what, let's say you know you have a certain maybe budget. Let's give it a nice number, 20,000 pesos. So you can buy a decent Samsung. Do you depend on the 20,000 pesos, go to the shop and ask, what are all the phone models in my price range? And then do you look at the specification one by one and say, compare every single specification and arrive at the phone with the best specification? And then say, this is the phone model I'm going to buy. Is that how you bought your phone? Yeah, really? You compared all the different specifications in details? I will bow to you. Most of the time, you saw some ads, you already have a certain feeling. You already have a certain liking. Be honest. You started with a liking. You like a certain model. So you went to the phone shop and said, I want to try this model. Isn't it? You did not compare all the specs before you chose a model. Be honest. 4, you already have. How did you select the 4? Yes, you started with a statement, I actually wanted iPhone first. So you already have a choice. That choice is an emotional choice. And that emotional choice leads you to begin to act in that way by choosing those that are closest to that emotional choice. This is how we buy cell phone. Often the ads attracted us. We see all the ads about iPhone. We hear our friends showing off. Wealthy people carry iPhone. Poor people don't have iPhones. That's a reality of life. So we sometimes want to emulate people who have, not the people who have not. So all that leads us to already have a bias towards certain decision. Then we make a shortcut decision as to which one we want. So it's really very much this feeling that leads to the decision. We did not choose it by every single phone in the budget, comparing every single spec and arrive at it. We didn't do that. We depended on people we trust to recommend. Yeah, all that, right? So when it is pulling between feeling and reasoning, we begin to choose based on our emotions. And then we use clever reasoning and say, actually, I wanted an iPhone, but he recommended these 4, and then I choose one of them. So we use our thinking to make this clever reasoning. So this is really how we make decisions, this cognitive dissonance pulling in opposite directions. Okay, and yeah. Yeah, follow your heart. We all follow our hearts. That's your feeling. Follow your emotions. Yeah. Precisely. And there you are. The second line there, one invariably reacts according to feeling, your heart. And then justify one's decision, emotionally charged decision, with clever reasoning. You justify it by saying you want to please yourself in the end. So you want to prove yourself that you're smart enough. Therefore, you have already used your emotion to make a decision. Now you are using your intellect, your thinking brain, to try to explain why you chose it based on your emotions. So we use emotion to make decision. We use our thinking brain to make excuses. True? That's usually how it happens, right? Same, you ask people when you get married, do you compare all the girlfriends you have? For guys, all the girlfriends you have and start to table out who is good at what, and finally, this is the girl I'm going to marry. No, it's who tickles your heart the most, right? So emotions dominate the world. Emotions create distress. That means when emotions disturb us, our mind gets disturbed. And emotion is that one thing to which all are spellbound. That means we become trapped by it. We are easily trapped by our emotions. And the Buddha warned us self-affliction of mental suffering. He says, whatever harm one enemy may do to another, or one hater to another, it is one's ill-directed emotions that inflict upon oneself a greater harm. In other words, when you talk about people who hate each other, so they may want to do harm to each other, but you yourself hurt yourself the most by allowing your ill-directed emotions to get out of control. In other words, when your ill-directed emotions get out of control, it hurts you more than people who don't like you. That's really what it boils down to. You can hurt yourself even more. And this is because once ill-directed emotions get out of control, it falls into mental proliferation. your imagination and memory and expectation crops up and starts to disturb you. You are under the spell of your emotional excitement. And mental proliferation is often thinking traps, basically. It's cognitive. In cognitive psychology, it is referred to as cognitive distortions, the mind getting distorted. Now, I won't go into the details, but there is a list you can download. If you download the whole, at the end of this presentation, I'll give you the link to download the whole presentation slide. Then in there, you can see the link to download this mental proliferation list. There are 21 of those, right? So that you can download that list and see for yourself. And ask yourself a question: what is affecting you the most out of this list of 21? And if you can understand that clearly, you can help yourself become less affected by mental proliferation, okay? So get back to this vicious cycle of emotions. It leads to all these bodily changes. It leads to your mind getting disturbed, mental disturbances, and then leads to all kinds of greed, anger, and finally even to depression and so on. What can we do about it? If we were to learn, if we don't do anything about it, this stress reaction in the body will trigger a continuous chain reaction. As long as this stress reaction continues, this chain reaction will continue. We can learn to be mindful. And this is what the Buddha taught as mindfulness. There are 4 foundations of mindfulness. I will touch on them in a moment. But basically, the first foundation is about observing what goes on in the body. So in other words, when something happens out there, for better or for worse, it affects your body first. And you can know that if you are mindful, if you are aware, you're not ignorant, right? You're not blinded by things going on. You are aware what's going on in your body. You will then recognize, oh, my heart is beating fast. Your heartbeat. Oh, I'm breathing. I'm breathing very rapidly. Then your emotion have been aroused. When you start to realize your heart is beating fast, you are into an emotional state already. Your breathing deepens. Your muscle getting all tensed up. Your body temperature rising. Your facial expression getting distorted. And your vocal expressions, usually the pitch goes up. You see, when people start to get angry, in their voice, the pitch goes up. As they start to scream, you know, their voice pitch goes up. And voice also gets louder, vocal expression. Then your fist and your arm are all tensed up, you know, and your body is sweating. All these are symptoms that you are falling into a deep emotional state. So practice the first step of mindfulness. Be aware of what goes on in your body. Your heartbeat, your breathing, your muscle tension. Once you realize your muscles are getting tensed up, you are unconsciously falling into emotional state, deep emotional state, and that can lead to depression. And what can you do to help yourself? Once you're aware of that, pause, relax, and think. Simple 3-step compassion, self-compassion. Pause meaning when something happens, don't start reacting. Relax means you do something to help yourself calm down, relax. And when you are adequately relaxed, then only think about what's going on. I'll explain this a little bit more in a moment. So this is really, in a nutshell, how you can help yourself. And when you're able to do that, right, then you can start to change the way you perceive your circumstances. By changing the interpretation of circumstances, you can actually tame your emotions. How? Right? Changing the interpretation means you no longer perceive threat or conflict. You now begin to perceive peace and harmony in your environment. And this is virtuous cycle of composure. Instead of vicious cycle of emotions, it has now transformed into virtuous cycle of composure when you are able to pause, relax, and think, and then begin to examine what's going on and ask yourself clearly what really is happening, right? Then you have a better perception of what's going on, then you can tame your emotions. And when you are able to do that, your body also calms down, emotional composure, and the mind calms down, the body calms down, your body becomes more comfortable and more relaxed. And all this leads to a happy state, purposeful, wholesome response. Now you begin to respond to the problem, and that is leading to wellness, comfort, peace, tranquility, and so on. So this is really how you can help yourself, right? So when things go on and affect you, realize bodily changes first. That is the first foundation of mindfulness. When you are sensitive, when you are able to realize that your body is changing, then you can help yourself very easily, okay? So if we can change our interpretations, we can tame our emotions. And by using this 3-step self-compassion, things happening around you, hurting you, then don't react. Stop reacting. Just hold it for a moment. Allow time for all, because the moment something happens, your amygdala is triggered, your stress hormones are released, flooding through your body. So you need time to allow it to subside. So allow time for this emotional excitement and anxiety to calm down. And all the hormones that are flooding through your body, you must allow time for it to subside. And in order to help it subside, you now practice something that can help you relax. Breathing is one of the best exercise. Take deep breaths. Just slow down what's going on and take a deep breath. And that can help you relax the body. And when your body starts to fall into that relaxation state, your stress hormones will stop. The stress hormone will not continue because the two cannot coexist. You cannot be relaxed and be stressed at the same time. That doesn't happen. So when you begin to consciously relax, it actually helps you reduce your stress, right? And in your anxiety are all calming down. Your stress hormones will all subside, will disappear. Right? By breathing, you help it along. So breathing is a good exercise to do. And then when you feel you are when you are consciously, the mind is consciously composed, right? Consciously compose the mind to respond, then you are able to think how to respond to the problem. And this is the process of introspection. Bring your attention inwards and ask yourself, what is it that I can do to help this situation, to make it feel better for me and for other people and all that. Bring your attention inwards. Do not depend on what's going on out there to make your decision, because when things are going on out there, it already disturbs your emotion. Any decision you make is very emotional. Relax, pause and relax, bring your attention inwards and then decide. Then I'll show you a few simple things, tips you can use to help you decide. But before we go any further, let's take a look at the Buddha's teaching in mindfulness. It is actually called Sati-patana. The Buddha called it Sati-patana. But very often it is misinterpreted as, or rather they interpreted and gave it a new term called mindfulness. But actually mindfulness is not a very good word, honestly speaking, because mindfulness can mean so many other things. Mindfulness is not one thing in English language. So if we rely on the word mindfulness, you might not be able to understand it better. Let's take a look at what is the meaning of the word Sati-patana later, right? Okay, so Sati-patana is the Buddha's teaching, which is commonly called mindfulness. It is broken into 3 root words. Sati-upatana. That's really how that word Sati-patana is made up. Sati refers to the attention. What are you paying attention to? What are you focusing on? Upa means bringing it inwards, within. Tana means to place it, to position it, right? To lay it down. So Sati-upatana means to bring your attention inwards and observe what's going on inside you. Don't be distracted by what's going on outside, because when you are distracted by what's going on outside, you will be reacting emotionally. So by bringing your attention inwards, it's place attention within. That's what Sati-patana means. And it's commonly translated as the word mindfulness. So let's listen to my teacher, what he has to say about Sati-patana.
Sati-patana. Sati-patana is normally translated as mindfulness. But I think mindfulness is a wrong translation. We are not trying to fill the mind. Mindful means the mind is filled. We are really trying to empty the mind, not to fill the mind. Because the mind is filled with all kinds of nonsense, and as a result, we are suffering. So we are emptying the mind. And the important thing is, to empty the mind, we can't be looking out into the world. We are looking out into the world through the senses, the five senses, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. When we focus on the things that we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, we begin to react to those things. If it is pleasant, we desire. If it is unpleasant, we hate. So we are not calming the mind, we are reacting. And therefore, we have to learn to take our attention away from what we see, away from what we hear, away from what we smell, away from what we taste, away from what we touch. So that means turning the mind inwards. And turning the mind inwards is not called mindfulness, it is called introspection. Introspection means turning the mind inwards. So the real Sati-patana is introspection.
Now let's take a look at the words of the Buddha. And this comes from the Sati-patana Sutra, the sermon that the Buddha gave on Sati-patana, what is commonly called mindfulness. Here the Buddha said, monks, this is the direct way for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the extinguishing of suffering and grief, for the attainment and the realization of Nibbana. This direct way is the four focuses of introspection. Now, the direct way, what the Buddha really meant here, if you were to practice Sati-patana and understand it thoroughly and practice it deeply, devoted to it, and if you were to practice it, it helps you purify your mind, meaning your mind will no longer be easily disturbed by emotions. Your mind will be free from emotional disturbances. And when a person's mind is 100% freed from emotional disturbances, that person would become the Arahant, would have become enlightened. An enlightened person is a person whose mind is completely freed from any kind of emotional disturbance. This is mentioned in the Four Noble Truths. The third Noble Truth mentioned it very clearly, that the Arahant, the enlightened being, is the one whose mind is never dependent on emotions, is never affected by emotions. And if you can purify your mind to that extent, you become enlightened. So the Buddha was saying that if you will follow this practice, this is the direct way to become enlightened. And four focuses of introspection, this term is sometimes translated as four foundations of mindfulness. That's another way of calling it. You know, it's all different scholars have different translations. But my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji, calls it the four focuses of introspection, right? And other people will call it the four foundations of mindfulness. And if we were to examine what are the four, the Buddha referred to Kaya, Vedana, Chitta, Dhamma. Kaya refers to the body, the bodily reaction. That's the first. And then Vedana refers to the feeling. In other words, it's not emotions yet. This is really how you feel in the body, whether you feel comfortable or not comfortable. That kind of feeling. That means it's a physical feeling, not the mental feeling. So whether your body feels comfortable or not comfortable, whether your body feels tense or relaxed, right? That is the Vedana, the feeling part. Then comes the mental part. The first two are physical, the next two are mental. Chitta, the emotional states, the emotional mind, how emotions are aroused, and what is your emotional state. And finally, when that happens, you're thinking. How does it lead you to think? In what way, right? So Kaya refers to these bodily activities, the reactions in the body. Vedana refers to feeling of tension in the body, right? Agitation, pain, discomfort, pleasant or unpleasant bodily feelings. So this is very much bodily feelings. Then Chitta is the mental part, the emotional part, right? Your affection, your mood, your temperament, your emotional states, what emotional states are being aroused. And finally, the way you think. So Dhamma refers to the conception, how your mind conceives thoughts and ideas, formation of thoughts and concepts, interpretation of one's circumstances based on the experience. So these are the 4 areas for you to pay attention to. But the first one is really Kaya, the body, right? And all this will help you bring your attention inwards, bringing your attention inwards on these 4 focuses of introspection. The first is the most critical one that you're going to start with, your body. Realize that something has changed in your body. When you have that realization, then you become aware that your body is experiencing stress. When it is experiencing stress, it will lead to mental disturbances, distress. So you can stop it before it gets that far. This is really psychotherapy. The Buddha's teaching is very powerful psychotherapy. So realize what goes on in your body and how the body feels. That's Kaya and Vedana. And realize that it triggers emotional states. That's Chitta. And realize that it affects the way you think, your perceptions of what is going on around you. Okay? So this 3-step self-compassion will help you to practice that. Pausing when something goes on, it affects you, it hurts you, just don't react right away. Allow yourself to calm down and relax. And then only when you're adequately relaxed, purposely focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem. This will reduce you falling into depression. Now, let's listen to another psychologist, Daniel Goleman, where he talks about 3 windows of opportunities in handling stress.
Stress isn't really so much in the things that happen in your life. It's really in how we react to them. And we can do something about those reactions. There are 3 windows of opportunity when it comes to handling the stress in our lives. The first is to do something to change things for the better. You know, whatever's the cause of the stress, if you can change it, do it. The second is in how you see it. Changing the way you perceive what's happening. Now, if we can't change the things that are happening to us, and we can't change how we see it, then we're left with a third opportunity, and that's handling the way our body and our mind react to these things. See, when the body is stressed, the emotional centers flood the body with stress hormones. And this makes it do things like shunt blood from the arms and the legs into the organs. It's a fight or flight response. It pumps up our blood pressure, speeds up our heartbeat. It steals energy, actually, from the immune system, it turns out, to get us ready for an emergency. It's what's called the fight or flight response. You've heard about that. Now, if that response gets triggered day after day, week after week, and month after month, over years, what happens is the biological system in our body that's most susceptible genetically, that's most reactive, is going to start to develop a stress-caused disease. You know, if you're a cardiovascular reactor, you're going to get high blood pressure. If you react in your gut, you're going to get problems there, and so on throughout the body. That's how stress over years and years leads to disease. It speeds up the process of coming down with the disease. So constant stress, it's like getting your amygdala stuck in high gear. Continual hijacks. We need to calm down. That's where relaxation comes in.
We need to calm down, and that's where relaxation comes in. So let's take a look at what Daniel Goleman mentioned about these 3 windows of opportunity. It says, by remaining calm and relaxed, we have 3 windows of opportunity to reduce stress and then bring our mind to a more wholesome state. First, change our circumstances, and that's wonderful. That means whatever is going on out there that is hurting you, affecting you, if you can change all that, that's wonderful. But we are not always having that opportunity to do that, or the resources, right? Things may be beyond our control. If it is within your control to change it, do that. What are some of the things within your control? Simple things. If you work in a company where your boss is a very nasty person who is always hurting you and always maybe abusing you, change job, right? Of course, there are other things you can change, circumstances. You can kill him. That's not good, right? But change job. That's what is meant by change your circumstances. If you happen to have good qualifications and can easily find another job somewhere else, instead of working for this nasty boss who is hurting you, do that, you know? I want to give you an example. During my time, I was working for a very large multinational company. There was the big boss at the top, then there was some middle-level bosses, and there was my boss, who was a very nasty guy. I didn't like him because he was very nasty. Every time I did something wrong, he would scream at me and shout at me. Every time I did something nice or something good, he wouldn't say a word. And it hurts me to see that happening. What did I do? I didn't kill him. I didn't change job because this is a foreign multinational company paying me a very good salary. I got to know his boss very well. So I don't want to hurt him. So what I did was I went to his boss and asked the big boss, are there other departments that may be interested in hiring my skill? And this is a very large multinational company. And I was very lucky. I was moved from one business unit to another business unit where I had a very good boss who looked after me. And eventually he sent me to the Philippines, and I did a lot of projects in the Philippines, and that's how my career went up. So I changed my circumstances, not necessarily kill the boss, not necessarily change the job because it's good money. I was getting very well paid at the time. So get to know his boss. So I give you a little hint. If your boss is not the owner of the business and he's just an employee, try to get to know his boss. That is one smart way. And if you know his boss well and you have a good relationship with his boss, if you find yourself being bullied or hurt or harmed, talk to his boss, not to hurt him, but find a way. Maybe you can be reassigned to another department. Simple as that. So that's what is meant by change our circumstances. Right? So to get rid of the problem, right? Stopping the problem. The second one, if you can't do that, if you don't have that opportunity to do that, change how we perceive our circumstances. And I also practiced that at first, actually. And that is basically to find inner peace, to learn how to change the way you think about what's going on so that you feel more comfortable. See, when I was working for that nasty boss, and he was yelling at me, screaming at me, you know what I was thinking? I was just thinking, this gorilla escaped from the zoo again. You know, when I'm thinking like that, I feel good. This gorilla is shouting at me again, never mind. And when I think like that, I actually smile. And he was very puzzled. When he's scolding me and I'm smiling, he was very puzzled. But actually that helped, because whenever he scolded me and he find that I was smiling and feeling calm, he started to scold me less and less, right? Actually, to tell you the truth, eventually I became one of his favorite, but I didn't want to stay that way. I didn't want to stay in his department. I just want to get out. So I managed to get out in time, right? Peacefully. So this is changing how you perceive what's going on. Next time you have a boss that keeps screaming at you, just remember this gorilla escaped from the zoo, right? So you feel better, right? You find a bit more peace and calm. And if you can't do that, if you're so caught up in it and you can't do that, change the way we respond. And change the way we respond basically is, what do you do that can make that situation more peaceful and more calm? By gaining control over our own lives, by gaining control over the circumstances. Actually, one of the things I did to that nasty boss, you wouldn't believe it. I wasn't trying to flatter him. Once in a while when I make coffee, I just ask, boss, would you like a cup? I'll make for you. You know, by doing that, I'm actually changing the way I'm responding to him. Instead of getting angry and upset and crying over him scolding me, I'm making him a cup of coffee. And sooner or later, he started to feel, hey, this is a nice guy, you know, Billy is such a nice guy. I shouldn't be scolding him so much. And that's why eventually I became one of his favorite. But I didn't want to stay that way. No, I got out, you know. A bad boss is a bad boss. He might be nice to you for some time, but if he doesn't change his character, get out, you know. So that's really what is meant by all these three things. Change the circumstances to get rid of the problem. Change the way you perceive things so that you find a bit more peace and calm within you. Or change the way you respond so that you have more control over what's going on in your life. So I hope that helps, right? And finally, think. That means pause, relax, think. So what should we think? Right? Think before you speak or act. And THINK is an acronym. T means whatever it is that you're going to speak, and whatever it is, make sure it is something truthful, right? Don't be an untruthful person. H means if it is something that is helpful. Whatever it is you're going to say or do, it will help the situation, right? Help things to be better. Or you can even go one step further. I for improvement. You can actually improve on the situation, improve on the relationship, which was the example I did. Make your boss a cup of coffee. That will help you improve the relationship with him, right? And these are some of the things you can do, right? And N, not everything is necessary. Sometimes certain things should be left unspoken. So try not to say. So it's really not whether it's truthful or not. Sometimes necessary overrides truthfulness. You're not trying to lie, but you know, no matter how truthful, sometimes if it's not necessary, don't say it. Which is like what happened to my boss. He's such a nasty guy. Sometimes I even felt like screaming at him and calling him by very bad words, you know. And he's such a nasty guy. Sometimes I actually wanted to say it to him in the face, say, you are such a nasty fellow. I wanted to say that, and that is truthful, but it was not necessary. Don't do it, right? So necessary sometimes overrides truthfulness. Not to say you should tell lies, but you should be aware that if it is not necessary, don't say it. And for married men, they're very good at that. When the wife goes and buy a dress and it doesn't quite look nice on them, brand new dress, and the wife spent a few thousand pesos putting on and ask the husband, honey, how do I look? You're not going to say, oh, honey, you look so awful in that dress. It's the wrong dress for you. Good husbands don't say that. Good husbands will say, oh, not bad, not bad. Not bad is another way of saying that's lousy, it's no good. Not bad. It's okay. It's okay. Okay is another way of saying, okay, all right, let's have some peace here. I'm not going to tell you it doesn't look nice on you. It's okay. See? So this is very important. Learn how to speak truthfully. And if the truth hurts, learn not to say it. Okay. And finally, everything you say or do, please do it with kindness, no matter what. Even if it is to somebody who hates you or to somebody who has made you hate him in one way or another. When you are kind to people, you are creating the conditions and the karma. You're creating this condition for more peace and harmony in life. So in other words, you know, When somebody is nasty to you and you are kind to him, then you have created condition for harmony. Because if the person is nasty to you and you're kind to that person cannot, inside him, if if it is a decent person, he cannot continue to be nasty to you. Can you be nasty to someone who's always kind to you? You can't. Even at first you don't like him and you start doing things to be nasty to that person. If that person continues to be kind to you, you start to tame down yourself. So kindness always works, no matter what. Kindness always works, even amongst the people who hate you or the people you may hate. Okay. So THINK, truthful, helpful, improving, necessary, kind. Actually, in the reverse order. Kind is the most important. Necessary is the next. Improving is the next. Helpful is the next. And finally comes truthful. Okay. So this is really a good tip for you. What to think and how to think when you speak or act. And finally, in summary, we are talking about Buddhist psychotherapy. How can we help ourselves? First, if we learn to pay attention to what's going on and be aware of the bodily conditions that's happening, this is actually helping us to observe early warning system, early warning to avoid stress and distress. So if you know your body is getting all tensed up, you are falling into stress. So learn to relax, pause and relax. So this first step, the first foundation of mindfulness, paying attention to your body is the most important thing. And then, of course, you pause. Don't react to things right away. Learn how to relax. This is all to do with the practice of mindfulness. And you can use mindfulness of breathing or to help yourself calm down. Take deep breaths, slow down your breath, and allow yourself to calm down. Okay. And finally, compose your mind so that you can purposefully focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem. This is what really the Buddha has taught. I'm simplifying it into simple English, but referring to the original teachings of the Buddha as found in the sutra, especially the Sati-patana sutra. So all these are actually taught by the Buddha. I'm just keep making it simple for you to understand and follow. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Okay. So I'll finish off with this last slide where the Buddha said, when faced with changing vicissitudes of life, vicissitudes means changing conditions, things that are always changing, affecting you, the realities of life. Okay. If emotions can be stilled and remain undisturbed, that means learn to tame your emotion first. If the emotion can be stilled and remain undisturbed, free from grief, right? So don't start crying over small things that's going wrong. Cleanse of defilements. Defilements arise when your mind goes into mental proliferation. Cleanse of defilements and liberated from fear. Then you free yourself from all this mental proliferation. This is the most supreme bliss. That means you can make yourself live in a state of peaceful existence, blissfulness. So that blissfulness can be achieved in everyday life by understanding what the Buddha has taught and putting it into practice. These exercises that can help you calm down and tame your emotions. So I hope this has been helpful. I shall finish off with this last slide, right, where I give you the link now. Take a snapshot if you're interested. So you know that link, you can download that document, tiny.cc/WP-psychotherapy. Okay, so you can download that. I have my email address there and also my Facebook link. In case you have any questions after we finish, you can write to me, contact me.